In recent years, JavaScript has made a lot of progress as an actual programming language. It started off as just a scripting language, thus the name script. But it has really evolved into its own entire language over the last 5 to 10 years or so. And with that comes some pretty cool changes, but some things that are a little different from other programming languages as well. And the one I want to talk about in this video is let and const. Let and const. So up until now, we have been defining every variable with var. Var name is equal to Caleb. We could also use let name is equal to Caleb, and we could also use const name is equal to Caleb. We could use any of these three. Now there are differences here. We know about var and hoisting. If you don't recall what hoisting is, go back to that hoisting video and just take a quick rewatch over that, just to make sure that you're familiar with what hoisting is. We know about scope. Again, there's a video on scope. You're going to want to watch that one again. Make sure you're somewhat familiar with the idea of scope, because let and const are block scoped. And so what this means is var, name is equal to Caleb, is accessible in a function like this. Function get name console.log name. I could even do this. I could do name is equal to new name, and then I could console log the new name down here. So console log name again, and let's go ahead and comment those out. And then let's run this function right here. And so it says Caleb and new name. And so the nice thing about var is that this is now in the global scope and a function can use it. We can even overwrite whatever the value was as soon as we call the function, and then the name actually changes. With let and const, we don't get that. We actually get more restrictions. Now, the interesting thing about good programming languages, you want restrictions. It doesn't seem like that at first, but actually you do, because the less freedom you have in a programming language usually means the faster the language will execute, means it's going to take up less memory in your computer, means more people are going to write code that looks the exact same way, means better standards. Basically, it's less of a mess if there are more rules in there. And what let and const do is introduce more rules. So let's go ahead and create an example here. So we've got a variable, and the course is equal to JavaScript for beginners. And what we can say here is if the course is equal to JavaScript for beginners, console.log, this course. I just want to make sure that this is working, so let's go ahead and refresh our page. Sure enough, it says this course. Now, if I wanted to define another variable, I would do var something is equal to something else. And then I could say console.log something. So watch this. This will still work. Something. What let does is it says, hey, you've got a variable, but I'm going to scope it to these curly brackets. And so when you try to console log something outside of these curly brackets, it's not going to work. Let's give this a shot and see what it complains about. There's an error in here. Reference error, something is not defined. I love how it used something as if it was actually part of the error. Let's go ahead and change that to a new var. There we go. A new var is not defined. That seems a little more verbose. Although we can see that a new var is actually defined, but what this is saying is this variable can only be used within these brackets, these curly braces. And so what let does, let allows us to use this variable only inside of here, so it's scoped to these curly brackets, but we can also overwrite it. So let lets you overwrite variables that are scoped to your closest set of curly brackets. And so if I move this up here, we're going to see that console.log will spit out something else. Sure enough, it says something else. And if I try to console log this again a second time, we're going to get both a log and an error. So we get a log and an error. So the main difference between var and let is scoped to, again, these curly braces. It is important to know that because you're going to see code out there that says let, whatever the variable name is equal to something, and then you won't be able to access it outside of its parent curly braces. But let's go ahead and take a look at const. So let's get rid of that. Const is somewhat the same thing. Const is a variable that is scoped to its closest curly braces called block scoping, but const stands for constant. It is a variable that cannot change, which is a funny way of basically saying this is a value and this value will never, ever, 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 ever change. And so it's no longer really a variable more than it is a constant data point that will never change. And so with a const, we are not allowed to overwrite it. So if we get rid of this, this will work perfectly fine. It says something. If we try to overwrite this, because it's already been defined here, if we try to redefine it, it's going to throw us an error. Look at that. Invalid assignment to const a new var. You're not allowed to reassign anything to a const. So there's actually a benefit to this. When using a regular variable, for example, course, it comes with a bunch of methods, basically functions on the string object. It comes with a bunch of different things in here. We can see a ton of them in here as well. And some of these allow us to actually change the value of course, whereas const does not allow us to do that. Const doesn't come with all the functionality that a regular variable comes with because it cannot change. So what's the point of assigning a method or a function to it if we can't change that value at all? So there's actually fairly big performance gains. And because it is block scoped, you don't have to worry about that leaking out of this if statement. Your JavaScript function, your JavaScript program does not have to worry about storing a lot of that in memory for too long. And so it's just a really fast way of using variables. Now, if that all sounds a little too crazy for you, you can think of it like this. Var is basically a variable that can be scoped to the global environment. Let is block scoped to the closest curly brackets. In fact, let's do this. Let and const are block scoped to the closest curly brackets. Let can be changed. Const can not be changed. And that's the main difference. And you're going to see these all over the place in modern JavaScript. So we've been using var up until now, but moving forward, we're probably going to be using var, let, and const. Now, what I would like you to do as a quick little task here is create a let variable inside of maybe an if statement or a for loop or something, and then try to access it outside of your if statement. And then write a const variable, a constant, and then just try to change the value of that const variable, and it will throw you an error. Once you've experienced these errors and how they actually work, it starts to make a lot more sense. And we'll be using these moving forward. You'll get a lot more experience with these as we progress through the rest of this course.